The number of single-parent households in America increased 9 times since the 1960s to roughly 3 million homes by the 2010s.
As of recent data, nearly 1 in 4 children under the age of 18, which is about 23% or around 19 million kids, live with just one parent. The U.S. has the highest rate of children living in single-parent households globally. This rate has nearly tripled since the 1960s, rising from 9% to 25% by 2023.
Around 10% of all single-parent homes are headed by fathers for a whole host of reasons, mostly surrounding gender norms and skewed legal processes.
Single mothers far outnumber single fathers. Approximately 15.3 million children live with single mothers, while only about 3.2 million live with single fathers. This disparity is quite stark, with women aged 35 to 39 having a 9% likelihood of being single parents, compared to a 2% likelihood for men in the same age group. The racial distribution of single-parent households also shows some disparities. White non-Hispanic families have the highest number of single-parent households, followed by African American and Hispanic families. African American children are the most likely to live in a single-parent household, with about 50% doing so.
He works hard. He eats with me and he loves me.
He teaches me all the things we need to know to be great fishermen.
I never know Daddy's motorcycle. My daddy is the best ever.
He's very kind and generous.
We play baseball outside together. We ride bikes. We watch sports on TV. And she even listens to me when I talk about girls.
My dad taught me how to ride my bike. Not only has he been a soldier for 22 years, he takes care of me and my mom.
Happy Father's Day, Papa. Love you.
Happy Father's Day!
Happy Father's Day.
I love you, Daddy. Happy Father's Day.
How much do you love your daddy?
No, I love him to the moon and back.
Pressure washing keeps this Brazoria County man busy.
I clean mainly algae.
Richard Miley started All Seasons Power Wash a few months ago. A job that has its challenges, especially when it comes to heights.
I try to stay off of roofs as much as possible.
Another challenge is trying to keep his employees happy, especially the 5-year-old.
I'm Daddy's little apple.
During the off-season, Miley says his daughter Ashton hands out cards trying to book new clients. On job sites, she either sits in the truck or inside a client's home or business.
Oh, she has a note for me.
But the other day, there were no smiles or laughs after what a new client said to him.
If your daughter's going to be with you, a man needs to learn that he needs to work.
Instead of saying something back, Miley turned to Facebook. Suddenly, new clients started calling, including this pizza shop owner that told Eyewitness News he was touched by Miley's post.
I don't mean to make any money off of my daughter, though. That wasn't the goal of this. And, that's kind of what happened, but in the same sense, it opened a lot of people's eyes to, single dads have it rough, too.
A single dad is the real reason why Miley says Ashton joins him at work. A year ago, she lost her mom and has been attached to Miley's hip since.
Hey.
The father-daughter duo won't last forever, though. Ashton starts kindergarten this August, which means Miley will have to look for new help soon.
Hopefully I've built up a good enough client base to where, I won't need her sales expertise anymore.
I'm sure she's helped with that. His daughter, may have lost him the client, but because of it, he's gained a lot more. Miley picked up a new job today, and he has more lined up later this week. But how about that line, single dads have it rough too?
I discovered a path where you can foster to adopt. What better way than to change the trajectory of someone's life by bringing them into your home and just trying to show them that somebody cares for them.
Yeah.
Right.
At age 45, Jason Smith took a leap into the unknown by fostering 3 brothers, Tavon, Irion, and Tavion, ages 9, 10, and 11. His home would be their 6th foster placement in the last 5 years.
You didn't decide to just foster one child. No. You decided, you know what? I think I could do 3. Was that the plan from the beginning?
Correct, that was not the plan from the beginning. So when you swing, your hand will go right over this, right? Right in between there.
Jason took a 9-week training program with the Department of Family Services in his home state of Nevada.
They prepare you almost for the worst, right? To help you understand this is a different type of kid.
Yep.
And here's what they may come with. And here's how you deal with that. You have a lot of choice and decision in that process.
Yeah.
And so do you want a boy? Do you want a girl? Do you want a kid with special needs? Do you know, so I was looking for a son, right, that I can potentially be a great match for. And in the process of looking at children, their profiles, I saw this sibling group. Yeah. And I was like, oh, that's some handsome kids. And I read their stories, cool. And I clicked on them, and it seemed like fate and destiny wanted us to be connected.
During this time, Jason was freshly grieving the death of his own father, Tucker.
I lost them in June 30th, 2021. I dealt with it. I flew home, did the arrangements, and I think I'm still dealing with that a little bit. Each day is better, but I feel pretty strongly that his spirit is with me and guiding me and making things happen.
It would seem to me that out of that tragedy, you decided to turn it into something good. Is that how you would describe your journey to fatherhood?
It inspired me to take action. I'd always toyed with the idea of having kids, right? And in the moment where he passed, I was like, damn, yeah, I never gave him grandkids.
After a 6-month foster, Jason jumped at the opportunity to adopt the brothers. They call him Papa J.
3, 2, 1,
Family!
Before we were living with Papa J, we always used to like hop from foster home to foster home.
He's actually funny, nice, super nice actually. And like he's just like the big dad that I never actually had before. And most importantly, he loves us and we love him.
What's your hope for your family going forward?
I just want to see them grow up to be smart, intelligent, great black men to make a difference, to take their experience and use that to do some amazing things.
What do you think Tucker would say about all of this?
He's so proud. He'd be so elated. No one in the street could tell him that those are not his grandkids by blood.
What are the differences and outcomes for kids growing up in a single parent versus a 2-parent household?
So we can start by seeing that in the immediate term. Let me emphasize some like basic things. If a kid only lives in a household with, a one parent or an unmarried mother, which is mostly the case, their chance of living in poverty are 5 times higher. Part of that reflects the fact that, moms from low-income backgrounds are more likely to become single moms. But even if you just look across moms of the same level of education, same background characteristics, it's not surprising that kids from married parent households live in households with more income, okay? Income is a big part of the reason why these kids do better. Why? Because their parents can spend more on housing in better neighborhoods. They get access to better schools. We see that, these parents spend more on their kids and enriching activities and educational activities. They basically have more opportunities. They're less likely to get in trouble in school. For boys in particular, they're less likely to get suspended. When boys are sort of suffering internally, they're more likely to act out in what psychologists refer to as externalizing behavior. Girls are more likely to internalize it. So I don't want to say that girls are necessarily not struggling as much, but boys are more likely to act out, which means they're more likely to get in trouble in school, and they're more likely to get suspended, and that cascades. Then we also see that they're more likely to be involved with the criminal justice system. Boys are particularly disadvantaged by the absence of a dad from their home. Okay. Boys get less investment, parental input, nurturing parenting. They're more likely to, have their mom spank them or be harsh to them. And again, that's not me judging single moms. It's really tiring to parent. It's really hard to maintain your temper when a kid is misbehaving.
Especially if it's a boisterous boy.
Especially if it's a boisterous boy and you don't have someone else to be like, could you take over? I need a break, right? But what's really interesting is that boys are particularly responsive to that. So let's say the differences in the parental inputs or investments are small. How they respond to that is large. The single biggest predictor of whether a Black boy sort of climbs the economic ladder into adulthood at a neighborhood level. So what neighborhood characteristics are most predictive of economically good outcomes for Black boys?
Can I guess?
Go ahead.
The proportion of single fathers.
The presence of Black dads in the neighborhood.
Yep.
So beyond just having a dad in your house, if there's a bunch of, if the households around you, Black households around you also have dads, single biggest predictor of whether you do well economically in adulthood.
Rough and tumble play, especially for boys, especially in early childhood, is very important because it teaches them the role of fathers is largely to both play but to set rules. That you can climb that tree, but you can't. Don't go higher than that. As opposed to mum would have not let them go up the tree at all. And this understanding, allowing of risk-taking behavior a little bit more is good. Now, the really interesting thing I learned from her that I think you would love to fold into some of your work is what happens to adolescent girls without a father.
Yeah.
Now, when you get into teenage years, it is absolutely crucial that a adolescent girl has father around. When the boys are there a little bit more, it seems like they're acting out behavior. It's more crucial for the boys earlier on, but for the girls, it seems to be during that later period. And you get like all sorts of weird sociosexual nudges here and there. You get all sorts of strange behaviors. I know like daddy issues is kind of a meme, but it almost seems to have arisen in the data.
This is like a really sappy thing for me to say. And I, again, to be clear, all of the conclusions I draw in the book are from very rigorous analytic work with data. But this was really sort of salient and top of mind recently because, of course, I think about all this and I'm thinking all the time about the class gaps in this and how can we not be honest about this? And I was at a graduation dinner. My son just graduated high school. And so there were a bunch of families there. And almost every dad that got up to toast his boy also toasted his wife. Everyone in this room was married, okay? And would say things like, and these boys are great boys because they have strong moms. And I was like, what an example this sets to both our teenage boys and our girls, right? This is what you should expect. When you grow up, you celebrate your wife and you treat her well. And girls, this is what you should expect, right? And so again, it's just sappy, but I was like, this is such a perfect microcosm of this privileged class of kids getting exposed to this positive example, which is just not nearly as widespread or prevalent. Kids from two-parent homes are much less likely to get in trouble in school. They're much less likely to get suspended. They're much more likely to be engaged in crime. They're more likely to graduate high school. They're more likely to graduate college. They're more likely to have higher earnings as an adult. They're more likely to be married as an adult, less likely to be a single parent themselves.
Single father households do vastly better than single mother households. Now, this article gets many things correct, but it also gets many things incorrect, so we're just going to go right through them. Children from single mother households are 5 times more likely to commit 10 times more likely to abuse chemical substances, 14 times more likely to commit surprise butt sex, sorry, YouTube doesn't like me to say the R word, 20 times more likely to end up in prison, 32 times more likely to run away from home, and single mother households also account for 70% of all teenage pregnancies. Single mother households also account for 70% of all child murderers and the majority of filicide cases. And in the article, it also effectively breaks down why economic differences aren't the cause for this. They take into account poverty and how much they make, and you still end up with this. Statistically speaking, single-father households do not fare worse than two-parent households. The only difference is that children are more likely to be promiscuous if there's only a father in the household instead of both a father and a mother. Other than that, single-father households fare just as good as two-parent households, meaning you only get problems with children when there's a father missing. But, again, there are a couple of things that this article article got wrong. First off, I want to cover this one point which is very important. I actually made a video a long time ago, and I said this exact same thing. They are more likely to commit surprise butt sex, as it's called. The problem is, I'm sure it's actually the case, but I don't know if it's that high. I kind of doubt it, because it's worded in a weird way. If you actually look at the stat they're talking about, they say 80% of surprise butt sexers with anger problems come from fatherless homes and are 14 times the average. With anger problems. What exactly does that mean? Like, why can't we just talk about people who actually do it? Why specifically anger problems? That really rubs me the wrong way. And I can't find any statistical data without the anger issues when it comes to single mother households. It's always with anger problems. What about the people who commit surprise butt sex who aren't really angry? They just do it because they're horrible people. Like, that's something that's really annoyed me. And it's important to keep that in mind. They probably still have higher percentages, but it's most likely overinflated because of the with anger problems. It also says that the best parent doesn't always get custody, especially if he is male. So it's talking about how judges will award custody to women more than men. The problem is, the majority of cases, men don't fight for custody. Men choose not to be in the lives of their children a lot of the times. And when men fight to have custody, when men try to be in the lives of their kids, they often are successful. It's something that's commonly repeated in the red pill spaces, but it's just blatantly false when you look at the data. And I think it's a good thing. Fight to be in their lives as much as you can.
Single fathers are less likely to have social connections that could help enhance their well-being in society, productivity, and general health compared to single mothers. The fact that there are more single mothers than single fathers means that support, be it financial, educational grants, and support groups in general, are more available for the single mother, while structural barriers bar fathers from accessing the same. Occupational choices and the minimal use of safety nets, including social support and child support, are also associated with higher mortality rates for single fathers. Loneliness and social isolation are important contributors to early death and are as important as smoking when it comes to obesity and premature mortality. Particularly, loneliness is associated with disrupted sleep patterns, higher stress levels, impaired immunity function, increased levels of cognitive decline, and increased rates of heart disease. Differences in pathways into single parenthood for men and women influence the increased likelihood of mortality for single fathers compared to mothers. For instance, the most common pathways to single parenthood include divorce and separation, with bereavement, which adds to the sources of stress and grief, being more common for single fathers as opposed to single mothers.
The hardest thing about being a single father is being able to get on with your life whilst not seeing your kids as much or at all. When you're around your kids, you feel like everything's okay, and you try to tell yourself that. But as soon as they leave, you want to clutch at them like one of their comfort blankets. You feel like without your kids around, you have no purpose, no hope, and no impact. Sometimes you live in the past and wish you had done things differently. Other times, you live in the future and you're worried and scared about what things will look like. Will there be another man in my children's life? Will I have to start dating women again? And in this place, you're full of fear. Fearful of the unknown and the man that you'll have to become in order to have a happy life again. Your friends try to comfort you as best they can. You'll be right, you'll get through it. But the reality is that there is a deep emptiness inside of you that they could never understand. And it's the emptiness of potentially never seeing your kids again or losing the deep connection that you once had. So you default to what you know, which is working a lot. But really deep down on the inside, there's this black hole of despair that hangs over you like a shadow. And it's you wondering if you're going to be able to get through this, with the fluctuations between utter hopelessness, extreme anger, and regret for letting your life get the way it has. But the reality is that you don't have a motivation or a commitment problem. You have an identity problem. The man who stands on his own 2 feet, the man who has desires, who has wants, and who has feelings. The real you, not the man who got lost amongst trying to serve and please all those around him at the expense of his own spirit. And so I thought my partner and kids should just put up with the fact that I was just never there. And even when I was there, I was never really present. And then after the breakup happened in what was once my safety and security in that relationship, I was forced to be out on my own. Everything that I thought was right was wrong. I didn't want to change. I didn't want to have to be the problem. And so I blamed anyone and everyone else that I could. And I didn't want to go through the 12 steps to rehabilitation. And there was one question that stood out to me amongst all of those mistakes, the pain, and the uncertainty. Who am I? Who am I without the kids? Who am I without my partner? And who am I without my friends? I only knew of myself as defined by things that were outside of myself. It was only when I was able to find my own identity as my own man, separate from those things that were outside of myself, that I was able to find true connection and power within myself as a man. The breakup was my initiation into manhood.
Single fathers have higher incomes compared to single mothers because of the overall employment rates. But the burden of balancing between caregiver and provider raises men's stress levels because they hardly find themselves in situations where they have to parent alone.
Hi guys, if you've scrolled through any dating apps lately as a man, you've probably noticed disproportionately more single mothers on the app, especially if you set the age preference to above 30. So much so that these women are calling themselves and their children a package deal in their bio, and it's almost become a meme at this point. Why do you think that is? There's around 8 million single mothers in the US, the highest in the world. For these women, online dating is their best shot at finding a man that could fill the role of both a boyfriend and a stepfather to their children. But there's a problem. A lot of men don't want a woman that comes with a package deal, and even fewer will be willing to commit to one for life. In fact, a study revealed that single mothers are 40% less likely to find a partner online after mentioning their children in their bio. For those that don't say that up front, over half are ghosted by men after revealing it to them in text. In 1972, evolutionary biologist Robert Trivers introduced the parental investment theory. This theory highlights one simple idea. Individuals are more willing to invest in raising their own offspring because it benefits their genetic legacy. This psychological concept clarifies why many men are not inclined to raise children who are not their own biologically, even if they can pretend to do so for a while. Do you see where this leads? The online dating space for a single mother shrinks with every kid in her arm and every additional year onto her age. Over a third of these women are struggling financially, and about half of those have never even been married. This desperation is then compounded by the fact that most men of substance don't go for a woman who fits this description. This limits her options to men that she doesn't necessarily find attractive. But here's the hardest part. After an excited decade or so of being the center of attention for the highest quality guys, these women quickly realize that they can't attract the same kind of man and will eventually have to settle. This sets off a search for a rare unicorn that doesn't exist. A man that's just as attractive and exciting as the ones that she dated in her 20s, but also head over heels in love and ready to commit to her now that she's finally ready to settle down. But of course, that savior never comes. She realizes that the longer she waits, the less chance she has at getting any man to put a ring on her finger, play a father to her kids, and pay the bills. She's now looking for a marriage of convenience as a safety net. Women that find themselves in this circumstance often reminisce about the exciting moments of their youth, and the stats for step-family marriages are pretty either, with over 2/3 of these marriages ending in divorce in less than 7 years. And the start to all of this can be as simple as an online dating profile. So if you're swiping through Tinder or encounter a woman like this, you will most likely be part of that same pattern I laid out to you. You'll likely be a safe bet for her, a retirement plan. And you'll sense a degree of desperation from her to quickly make it official. You'll be left with a lifelong commitment to a woman who often compares you to her past baby daddies and ex-boyfriends.
Single-parent families face significant economic challenges. Nearly 30% of single-parent families live below the federal poverty level, compared to just 6% of married couple families. Single mothers are particularly vulnerable, with a poverty rate of 31% for families headed by unwed mothers and 15% for those headed by unwed fathers. Childcare costs are another major burden. Single-parent households spend about 34% of their income on childcare, which increased by 47% during the COVID-19 pandemic, making it even harder for them to afford.
Life happens, and often not the way we planned. If you've recently become a single parent, you may feel like your whole life is spiraling out of control, including your finances. But starting fresh or going solo does not have to result in a financial freefall. First, get to know your budget. Identify your new household income and recurring expenses like rent or a mortgage, utilities, and childcare. Remember, if you're receiving alimony or child support from a recent divorce, those payments may stop or get smaller over time. So plan ahead on how you'll make up for that lost income or adjust your lifestyle. Then set up automatic bill pay to help you stay current and avoid paying late fees. Also create an emergency fund. Try to have at least 6 months worth of living expenses in that account. When saving for the long term, if you have to make a tough choice between saving for retirement and paying for college, choose retirement. Your kids can always get scholarships, grants, and loans to pay for college. Finally, to make sure you stay on the right track, seek professional advice from a credit counselor or financial advisor.
Conflict and separation worsen parental and child health, with the fact that children often end up with the mother indicating issues relating to mental health and social functioning, further complicating the father's issues. Marriage offers men a protective layer against degenerative health outcomes and unruly behaviors. Particularly, married men are less likely to engage in activities related to delayed help-seeking, substance abuse such as alcohol consumption or cigarette smoking, and risky driving or sexual behaviors, among others. Men have poorer engagement with primary care, evidenced by fewer consultations with general health practitioners. The general reluctance to access healthcare services, lower symptom awareness, and masculinity-related behavioral paradigms might make men unwilling to overcome practical barriers associated with accessing healthcare, including waiting times and the absence of extended clinic working hours. High-quality time spent talking with patients is associated with better adherence to treatment plans, better health-related decisions, and improved influence on overall health-seeking behaviors. Despite all this, single fathers are more likely to access healthcare compared to partnered fathers. Single parenthood is associated with adverse health outcomes, including increased likelihood of mortality. Particularly, mortality in single fathers is 3 times the rates in single mothers and homes with partnered parents. Research on single-parent homes often focuses on single mothers, and most sources report lower socioeconomic status, poor physical and mental health, higher levels of psychological distress, and more hospital admissions than the general population. Mortality rates are almost twice for single compared to partnered mothers, a phenomenon associated with inadequate household resources, social assistance, and employment status. Single mothers also report elevated likelihood of mortality related to external injuries and poisoning compared to partnered mothers. Single fathers are twice as likely as single mothers to report adverse health-related outcomes, but are half as likely to access healthcare services. When controlling for health selection effects, such as patient history and socioeconomic circumstances, single fathers have a 30% increased likelihood of mortality compared to cohabiting fathers. Single fathers are exposed to a few factors associated with higher mortality, including greater monthly binge drinking and reduced vegetable or fruit intake. Compared to cohabiting men, single fathers report a greater risk of ischemic heart disease and traffic injuries.
The impact on children is noteworthy. Children in single-parent households are more likely to experience educational and health challenges. They often score lower in educational attainment, are more likely to drop out of school, and face higher rates of teen pregnancy and future divorce. Additionally, they may have less access to quality health care, safe communities, and enriching activities. In summary, single-parent households are a common and growing demographic in the U.S., with significant implications for the children and the economy.
Boys tend to be more idle in young adulthood. Sometimes, specific genders seem to react in different ways to growing up with a single parent. In terms of boys, some studies have suggested that they're more likely to be idle in young adulthood. This includes things like being unproductive and even dropping out of school. While boys are more likely to experience this, it can definitely happen with girls as well. Girls are at a higher risk for teen pregnancy. Multiple surveys and studies have shown a link between single-parent homes and teen pregnancy. While unplanned pregnancies aren't always a bad thing, teen pregnancies in particular can involve certain issues and complications, such as lack of financial opportunities and access to higher education. Some have theorized that this correlation is due to the lack of a male figure in the household, which can have negative psychological effects on a young girl. Kids with single parents might end up being less satisfied in life. The study found a small but persistent decrease in life satisfaction among those who had grown up with a single mother throughout childhood. They found that these individuals were less likely to experience educational and economic success and good physical health. Additionally, they found a connection between single mother childhoods and unmet relationship goals. But remember, there was only a small decrease in life satisfaction when compared to those with two parents. There could be an increased risk of psychiatric issues. There's a huge wealth of scientific literature which states that single-parent homes are a risk factor for a number of mental health issues in children, including depression and psychological distress. Once again, we're not saying this happens to all children in these situations, but there's definitely a link. Also, we have to mention that the trauma of potentially negative memories might be the root cause, not necessarily single-parent homes specifically. Some studies have pointed out that in some cases, a single-family household can actually be more beneficial. The main example would be an extremely stressful two-parent home versus a peaceful, relaxed single-parent home. When there is extreme conflict, violence, or stress in a two-parent home, a single-parent home is actually a much more beneficial environment for the child. That's definitely something worth keeping in mind as we list some of the negative effects here. Kids with a single parent might end up having a stronger relationship with that parent. There's always a very special bond that forms between children and their parents. But one study suggests that in a single-parent home, that relationship could potentially be even stronger and unique in a way that is unseen in two-parent homes. Not only is the relationship often stronger in this situation, but the children and parents are more dependent on each other, more affectionate, and more likely to work together towards a common goal. Children with single parents benefit immensely from a strong relationship with their grandparents. What can be done to avoid some of these negative effects and help children in these situations? One study suggested a perfect solution. Encourage a strong relationship with the child's grandparents. The recent study discovered that this simple act can considerably boost social skills and help reduce behavioral problems in adolescence.